As a new gardener to Central Florida, I found this article and I think it's helpful. It's from the Orlando Sentinel in 1996, but it's still very relevant. And it's written as a letter, open letter. Dear Transplant from the North, welcome to Central Florida gardening. I am a northern transplant myself, and the intent of this open letter is to help you adjust to gardening in Central Florida. And that's important for me because my first year here, everything I planted, it seemed like it just would die. Then I got a drip watering system put in, and things are surviving. But not everything. So I've learned that you can't just buy things because they're sold at Walmart, because they sell things to sell things, not necessarily because they grow well in this climate. So you need to do your research, and a really good research site is the University of Florida. They have a lot of information there, and talking to local nurseries when the people that own them are very knowledgeable. So it says here, I will offer some suggestions and comments on the similarities and differences between gardening here and in the north. I'll also give some of my perceptions about the Florida climate and gardening myths that are bound to come your way. But first, here are a few words of encouragement. Do not be intimidated by our subtropical year-round growing conditions. It is really not very difficult. Keep asking questions and keep reading, and in no time the mysteries will dissipate. Similarities. It is my opinion that there are more similarities than differences. The basics of growing plants are the same. Your skills will easily adapt to different plants and the different climate. Differences. The differences with northern gardening lie mostly in the plants grown here and the climate. There are several ways to become familiar with the plants suitable for Central Florida. A walk around your neighborhood and trips to nurseries with a notebook will give you a good handle on what is grown locally. And I just need to move this up a little bit. When it comes time to buy plants, you will see certain plants labeled with hardiness caution statements, such as in protected areas only or protect from frost. Take those seriously, and my advice is to bypass them in favor of plants considered hardy for our area. So up north, things would just die in the winter, and if they were perennial, they'd come back. So this whole protecting from frost is an interesting new thing for me. And I've heard people talk about covering the plants with sheets. Some people talk about using Christmas lights to keep them warm. I've watched a video where somebody put stakes in the ground and wrapped plastic around the stakes, and then covered that with a sheet that they took off in the day so the tree or shrub could breathe. So they're all different ideas, things to learn how to garden here. All right, so take those seriously, and my advice is to bypass them in favor of plants considered hardy for our area. And that sounds like good advice, just to start with buying plants that do well in this area. Also, stay away from plants from the north for which you may have a nostalgic yearning. Lilacs, sweet cherries, apples, and pears belong north of here, just as mangoes, bananas, and papayas flourish in South Florida. So they're saying mangoes are South Florida, and I believe those are more for 10. Zone 10. And the University of Florida site says they've seen them grow as far north as Melbourne, and that is 10. But I've seen up in my area some mango trees. One in particular is sort of in between two buildings at a restaurant. And I think I've seen mangoes on the trees and signs saying "Do not pick the fruit" at one time. And I didn't know what the fruit was when I first got here, but I remember seeing that. So it might be a microclimate that it's in between those two buildings, sheltered. They might be warming it with lights or something. I'm not sure how that's surviving, but it's interesting that it is. Bananas, though, I've seen a lot of banana plants in this area, and I don't know about papayas. I don't even know what they taste like, so I don't know if I'd want to grow one. Cherries, apples, and pears. They now have peach trees that are acclimated to Florida, and because of the problem with the orchards, the citrus orchards, and the greening problem, some of them are switching over to peaches, a low chill variety. And I heard that, and I bought a peach tree at Home Depot, and then I found out that just because they sell it in my area at my Home Depot, it's not going to get the 450 chill hours that variety, the Florida King, which needs to be up here, would get, because our area gets 100 to 200 chill hours. And since that plant needed 450, I returned it and that was a lesson that just because it's sold at Home Depot and it says Florida King, it sounds like it might be one of the varieties. It's not going to work for me. So you really have to research. And I've looked at the University of Florida website, and they have certain varieties of peach trees that need only 100 chill hours, and I just had to find out where to find them. And I talked to a master gardener in the area, and she said they're really hard to get because the orchards snap them up. So that's going to be a project, trying to figure out where to get one for my little yard. All right, so climate. Florida lies entirely within two hardiness zones, zone 9 and 10. And this has an 8B, so I don't know why they are saying 9 and 10, because it's 8B, 9A and B, and 10A and B. Zone 9 is all of North Florida to a U-shaped line roughly from Sarasota to Melbourne. So right here, Zone 9. Well, I'm right over here. And I found out that even over here, or even in DeLand, it's not on this map. I went to a nursery in DeLand, and they said they're able to grow certain things that I may or may not be able to grow, and I might be able to grow things they may or may not be able to grow, because I'm more near the coast. And the man at the nursery said that if you're near a lake out here, that's another microclimate where you may be able to grow certain things. So there's a lot involved to it. Zone 9 is all North Florida to a U-shaped line roughly from Sarasota to Melbourne. Everything below this line is Zone 10. But growing conditions are quite different between Central Florida and the Panhandle. What's this part? So an attempt has been made to divide Zone 9 into A and B based on frost records. Unfortunately, the line between A and B is quite squiggly, with occasional islands of A and B territory. If you have doubts about a plant's hardiness in your area, talk with nursery employees. And I've learned that you have to make sure that they are knowledgeable employees, not just people that work at the big box stores, because they may or may not have local knowledge. They may just have been people that were hired for those stores, Home Depot, Walmart, those places, and they were put into the gardening section without any knowledge. So you just don't know. When you hear or read that a plant needs a protected location, assume that the plant will not survive a frost. Avoid planting it if you do not want to take chances. Unlike in the north, most of Florida's rain falls during the summer. So it's like a rainy season in the summer. And most of that rainfall comes during heavy but brief afternoon downpours. And that's been my experience, that in the summer and in the fall, the late summer, it'll rain hard for, seems like an hour, maybe a half an hour, and then it stops and the sun comes back out. It's the funniest thing. Where up north, we have periods of rain, rainy days, and a couple of days might be rainy and cloudy. But here, it's like it's just a beautiful day, then suddenly it rains for an hour, then it stops, and the sun comes out and it's nice and hot again. This coincides with the most active growing season. Winter and spring are usually dry. The only time Florida gardeners are likely to underwater is during the spring, when new leaf growth needs water and fertilizer. The generally cool and sunny winters are perfect for the much-loved northern summer annuals such as petunias and pansies. It is helpful to keep a record of the temperatures for a year and to install a rain gauge to measure rainfall. Such a journal over time will help you become intimately acquainted with your new climate. Myths. The first myth you are likely to hear is that you cannot overwater in Florida. In fact, more harm is done by overwatering than by any other gardening practice. This holds true for lawns, annuals, trees, and houseplants. Now, I find that surprising because I have very sandy soil, and I'm assuming that it just drains, the water just drains right through it. That seems to have been what happened to my flower garden before I got the drip irrigation in. Another myth is that for every pest there is a spray. Overuse and misuse of pesticides are worries shared by all Florida public health officials. You might also hear this myth: don't dig a cheap little hole for an expensive tree. When planting a tree, dig a hole no deeper than the root ball. Dig a hole twice as wide as the circumference. There's no need to enrich the soil with cow manure or peat moss. So that's interesting. They're saying you don't need to enrich the soil. Just dig the hole wide, twice as wide as the root ball, and stick it in the ground. Plant the tree so it is 1 inch above the surrounding soil. And that's something a nursery told me to do, to put it above so it sits 1 inch higher than the ground level. And then it'll gradually sink in, because you don't want it to settle in deeper than the ground level. Finish off with a 3-inch layer of mulch, pulled 6 inches away from the trunk. And do not mulch citrus trees. Water well the first few weeks until new growth appears. After at least 2 months, start a modest fertilizer program in February, June, and October. Bugs. When you hear the word bug, it is important and necessary to remind yourself that all garden creatures fall into one of two categories: beneficial and harmful. Less than 1% of all garden creatures are harmful to plants. All the rest are either neutral or actively beneficial, meaning they eat harmful pests. The trouble with pesticides is that they often kill the good bugs that keep harmful ones under control. When the beneficial ones are killed by pesticides, you may have a population explosion of all kinds of harmful bugs. Also, the more often pesticides are used, the more bugs become pesticide resistant. A final note: pesticides will leach into the groundwater and into the aquifer and are the source of our drinking water. You can make your own non-poisonous spray in your kitchen. To a gallon of water, add a tablespoon of vegetable oil and a tablespoon of liquid dish soap. Pour this into a plastic squirt bottle and spray at or right after sundown. Repeat as often as necessary. Few pests will survive this. It has been tested and found effective by the University of Florida. So that's a really interesting article, a lot of information there. And it matches up with some of the things I've heard. They didn't talk here about nematodes, and apparently The sandy soil that I have here, these nematodes love it. They're called root knot nematodes, and let's see if it's on here. Florida nematode. Below you'll find the table of contents for the Florida Nematode Management Guide. You're also able to follow links to online publications that cover materials. So these nematodes are, especially the root knot nematodes, get into the roots and prevent the plants from intaking nutrients. And they may look like they're drying out, and you may think that you're not watering it enough, but it's actually that these little tiny microscopic nematodes get into the roots, and then the roots are infected with it and they cannot get the nutrients they need. But there are beneficial nematodes too, so that's something also to be aware of. And I've heard that from this university site that they hate, or French marigolds have something in them that nematodes, these root knot nematodes, hate. So if you plant companion crops or plants, that can help keep down the nematodes. So there's a lot to learn, and I'm just beginning the journey. Any information people have, I am certainly interested in learning from other people as well as researching. And what I'm going to do is going to make some raised beds and try vegetable gardening, and I'm going to put all fresh soil in it. Try to keep the nematodes out from the bottom, to seal it off from the bottom, put good soil on the top, make sure it's very rich and organic, with organic material, because the nematodes don't like that, and hopefully we'll have a good garden, and I'll make some videos about things as it progresses.